What if I told you that the world isn't run by kindness, but by deception? That behind every throne, every leader, and every hero, there are strategies so cold, so ruthless, that most people would never dare to even imagine them. This is the world of Niccolo Machiavelli, a man remembered as a villain, yet secretly admired by kings, CEOs, and politicians for over 500 years. Machiavelli dared to reject Christian morality. He looked at life not as it should be, but as it is brutal, unpredictable, and unfair. Instead of preaching virtue, he gave leaders something far more dangerous, a manual on how to seize and hold power by any means necessary. But here's the twist. Was he really the devil of politics? Or was he simply the first to tell us the uncomfortable truth that the world rewards the cunning, not the kind? Before we answer, let's step into his world. Florence, late 1400s, a city of art and beauty, but also of blood and betrayal. Imagine being just 9 years old, walking through the city square and seeing men hanged upside down, left to rot for weeks as a warning. That was Machiavelli's childhood. He grew up surrounded by chaos, corruption, and brutality, and it left a scar that would shape his philosophy forever. His father, Bernardo, was a poor lawyer with big connections but little success. His mother, on the other hand, was deeply religious, writing hymns and poems. Between a skeptical father and a devout mother, young Niccolo learned two worlds: faith and doubt, idealism and pragmatism. He chose the latter. At 29, Machiavelli became one of Florence's top officials sent on missions to negotiate with kings and popes. For over a decade, he was the voice of his republic. But when the Medici family, one of the most powerful dynasties in Europe, took back control, Machiavelli was accused of conspiracy, thrown in prison, tortured, and finally exiled. And it was in exile, stripped of power, reputation, and honor, that Machiavelli wrote the book that would make him immortal, The Prince. But here's the shocking part. This book wasn't a moral guide. It wasn't about virtue. It was a survival manual for leaders written in blood and betrayal. And in it, he asked one of the most haunting questions in history. Is it better for a leader to be loved or feared? What do you think? Would you rather be loved or feared? Take a second, because Machiavelli's answer might change the way you see leadership forever. In 1513, after torture and exile, Machiavelli sat down to write the book that would change politics forever, The Prince. But this wasn't written for the people. It was written as a gift, an offering to Lorenzo de' Medici, the ruler of Florence, the very family that had destroyed Machiavelli's life. Think about that: beaten, humiliated, and cast aside. Yet instead of revenge, he chose strategy. He wrote a guidebook for rulers on how to seize hold and expand power. Cold, precise, unapologetic. And at the heart of it, Machiavelli gave us his most infamous lesson. A ruler should not worry about being good. He should worry about being effective. Virtue, compassion, honesty. Those were luxuries. What mattered was survival, and to prove his point, he turned to a man he considered the perfect example of leadership, Cesare Borgia. Cesare Borgia, son of Pope Alexander VI, was building his own empire in Italy. When he conquered the city of Cesena, he left his right-hand man, Ramiro de Lorca, in charge. Borgia gave Lorca one order: do whatever it takes to bring order, and Lorca obeyed. Heads rolled in public. Families watched loved ones executed. Property was seized. Rebels were tortured. Castration, mutilation, terror. Nothing was off limits. For months, the city lived in horror. Lorca became the face of brutality, the embodiment of tyranny, and the people hated him. Now here's where it gets sinister. Borgia returned to Cesena, realized the hatred boiling among the citizens, and decided to act. One night, under the cover of darkness, he had Lorca captured. By morning, the people awoke to a gruesome sight: Lorca's mutilated body split in two, his head mounted on a stake in the city square. But instead of recoiling in disgust, the citizens cheered. They felt relief. The tyrant was dead. And who stood before them as the hero, Cesare Borgia? He blamed Lorca for the cruelty, painted himself as the savior, and walked away with his reputation intact. This is the kind of leadership Machiavelli admired, cruel when necessary, but cunning enough to escape the blame. A leader who understood the darkest truth: people forgive terror if you give them hope right after. And from this story, Machiavelli dropped his most famous question: is it better for a ruler to be loved or feared? He admitted, in a perfect world, both. But in reality, love is fragile. Love fades. But fear is reliable. Fear keeps people in line when love cannot. Yet even fear has limits. Machiavelli warned, "Be feared, but never hated. Hatred breeds rebellion, and rebellion means death." So the perfect leader walks a razor's edge, loved when possible, feared when necessary, but never despised. Let me ask you, if you had power, real power over people's lives, would you rather be loved or feared? Because Machiavelli believed the choice could mean the difference between a throne and the executioner's block. We're taught from childhood, always be honest, always be good. But Machiavelli, he laughed at that. To him, honesty and goodness were dangerous, because they gave your enemies a weapon to use against you. He wrote that a ruler must be willing to lie, cheat, and betray if that's what survival demands. Think about it. If your enemies are willing to deceive, and you refuse to, aren't you already at a disadvantage? Machiavelli compared politics to war. And in war, he said, honesty is like refusing to pick up a sword while the enemy swings at you. But here's the twist. He didn't say you should openly be cruel or dishonest. Instead, he said, a leader doesn't need to be virtuous, he only needs to appear virtuous. Why? Because people don't see behind the curtain. They see the stage, the speeches, the gestures, the carefully crafted image. Machiavelli knew the truth about human nature. Most people don't care what's really happening. They judge leaders by what they seem to be. If you look honest, if you speak with compassion, if you show mercy in public, even if it's all an act, people will believe you are good. And if your actions in the shadows secure victory, history will remember the results, not the methods. This is why Machiavelli valued appearances as much as actions. A mask of virtue could cover a heart of steel. So let me ask you, would you rather follow a leader who is truly good but weak, or a leader who only pretends to be good but actually protects the nation? This is where things get uncomfortable, because deep down, most people would choose safety over morality, and Machiavelli knew it. He stripped away the illusions we comfort ourselves with, forcing us to face a brutal truth. The world doesn't reward sincerity, it rewards results. And yet there's still more. Machiavelli wasn't just talking about rulers, he was talking about life itself. He believed our fate is shaped by two forces: virtu, our strength, skill, and courage, and fortuna, the unpredictable luck of life. Machiavelli believed that life is ruled by two forces. One we can control, the other we cannot. The first is virtu, not virtue in the Christian sense of goodness, but something sharper, fiercer. For Machiavelli, virtu meant strength, courage, audacity, skill, intelligence, the raw ability to shape the world around you. The second is fortuna. Fortune, luck, the unpredictable chaos of life. And here's the chilling part. Machiavelli wrote that fortune controls half of what happens in your life. The other half is yours to command. He compared fortune to a raging river. When calm, it seems harmless, but when the rains come, it swells, breaks its banks, and sweeps away everything in its path, houses families, entire cities. That, he said, is how fortune strikes. Unpredictable, merciless, beyond your control. But here's the twist. Machiavelli didn't tell us to fear fortune. He told us to prepare for it. Build dams, dig channels, strengthen the walls. So when the flood comes, you don't drown. In modern terms, bad luck, failure, crisis, they're coming whether you like it or not. But if you prepare, if you strengthen your skills, your mind, your resilience, you can survive the storm. Machiavelli warned a strategy that works today may fail tomorrow. Why? Because fortune changes. The true mark of strength is adaptability. Rigid leaders and rigid people break when life shifts. The flexible endure. So he urged us, act boldly when the moment calls for it, but adapt when fortune turns against you. In other words, don't cling to what worked yesterday. Create new strategies for today. But Machiavelli went even deeper. He believed that under our polished masks, beneath morality and manners, we all carry something darker, an inner beast. Centuries later, Freud would call it the unconscious. Jung would call it the shadow. But Machiavelli saw it first, and he warned, don't ignore it, don't repress it, learn to use it. A leader, he said, must sometimes fight like a lion, fierce, intimidating, unstoppable. Other times like a fox, clever, elusive, able to slip from traps. Both beasts live within you. The key is knowing when to unleash them. So let me ask you, when fortune turns against you, do you shrink back? Or do you unleash your inner lion? When traps surround you, do you panic or do you become the fox? Because for Machiavelli, survival and greatness belonged to those who mastered both. And yet his philosophy wasn't just about strength. It was also about truth, an ugly truth most of us prefer to ignore. The truth that the world as it is will never match the world as it should be. We all carry an image of how the world should be. A place where honesty is rewarded, where kindness returns to you, where justice prevails. But Machiavelli ripped that illusion apart. He said, the man who lives by how the world ought to be walks straight into his own ruin. Why? Because the world doesn't run on ideals, it runs on power, ambition, and self-interest. Imagine stepping into a game where everyone cheats, but you play by the rules. What happens? You lose. That's how Machiavelli saw life. If you base your actions only on how things should work, ignoring how they actually do work, you set yourself up for disaster. It's a terrifying realization, because it means that no matter how much we crave fairness, the world is not designed to be fair. And yet here's the paradox. By accepting this brutal truth, you don't become weaker, you become stronger. When you stop expecting life to be kind, you start preparing for its cruelty. When you stop assuming people will always be loyal, you start watching for betrayal. And when you stop living in illusions, you begin living with clarity. Machiavelli wasn't telling us to abandon all morality. He was telling us, don't be naive. Recognize the gap between ideals and reality, and survive in reality. But this truth cost him everything. Remember, The Prince was written as a gift to Lorenzo de' Medici to win back his favor, yet Lorenzo never even read it. And even if he had, would you really trust a man who tells you that betrayal, cruelty, and deception are tools of power? By writing the most honest book on politics, Machiavelli destroyed his own chance to return to politics. His words were too raw, too unsettling. He was left isolated, unwanted, seen as dangerous. Ironically, the man who wrote the ultimate guide to power died with none. And yet his book lived on. Hated by popes, banned by kings, called the work of Satan, yet secretly studied by rulers, generals, and CEOs for centuries. Because deep down, everyone who seeks power knows Machiavelli was telling the truth. So here's the real question for you. Would you rather live in a comfortable illusion, or in the harsh reality where you can actually win? When Machiavelli died in 1527, he was almost a nobody. No great position. No legacy in politics, just a failed statesman remembered only for his book. But after his death, The Prince spread like wildfire, and its reputation was explosive. One English cardinal declared it had been written by the very finger of Satan. Pope Paul IV banned it outright. And then came the massacre that sealed Machiavelli's fate. In France, 1572, during the Wars of Religion, thousands of Protestants were slaughtered in what became known as the St. Bartholomew's Day Massacre. The Queen Mother, Catherine de' Medici, yes, from the same Medici family to whom Machiavelli had dedicated The Prince, was accused of masterminding the bloodbath. Writers rushed to find someone to blame, and one of them, Jean de la Gesse, painted Catherine as a devoted reader of Machiavelli, and Machiavelli himself as the evil genius behind her cruelty. From that moment on, Machiavellian became synonymous with deception, treachery, and cold-blooded evil. It didn't matter what he actually wrote. The myth had been born. Soon Machiavelli became a stock character in plays and novels, the scheming villain, the puppet master, the man who would betray anyone for power. But here's the irony. The real Machiavelli never ruled a kingdom, never led an army, never even held lasting power. He wrote about power, but never truly held it. His theories shaped politics, but his own life was marked by exile, failure, and rejection. And yet, because his words rang with so much uncomfortable truth, history decided to turn the man into a monster. Today, his name is still controversial, but his insights, they live on. Politicians still wear masks of virtue while playing ruthless games behind the scenes. Leaders still balance fear and love to hold power, and each of us in our own way still wrestles with fortune and the beasts within. Machiavelli forced us to see what we'd rather not see, that beneath the polished speeches and smiling faces, power is never clean. So, let me ask you, was Machiavelli truly a villain, or was he just brave enough to say out loud what everyone else hides? And maybe the scarier question is this: if you were in his world, facing betrayal, chaos, and the flood of fortune, would you dare to play the game the way he did? Niccolò Machiavelli lived a life of failure, rejection, and exile. He never held lasting power, never became the ruler he dreamed of advising, and yet his words outlived him. Why? Because the prince didn't just speak to kings, it spoke to human nature, to the raw, uncomfortable truth of how people act when survival and ambition are on the line. Machiavelli's philosophy is like fire. In the right hands, it can light the way, preparing you for the storms of fortune, teaching you resilience, adaptability, and courage. In the wrong hands, it burns everything, justifying cruelty, manipulation, and betrayal. That's why his ideas are so dangerous and so powerful. But here's the part most people miss. Machiavelli wasn't telling you to be evil. He was telling you to open your eyes, to stop living in illusions of how the world should be, and start preparing for the world as it is. Because when you see clearly, when you stop expecting life to be fair, you can finally start playing the game of life with strength and awareness. So I'll leave you with this. Would you rather be comforted by a sweet illusion, or empowered by a harsh truth, because Machiavelli believed that only those willing to face reality, its darkness and its light, can ever hope to rise above it? If this journey gave you a new perspective, let me know in the comments. Do you think Machiavelli was a villain, or a realist ahead of his time? And if you want more timeless lessons like this, make sure you subscribe, because the past still has secrets to shape your future.